live in simultaneous broadcast from a hidden cornfield in Wisconsin and some time-forgotten Holy of Holies in the Theban mountains of Luxor, Egypt. Intrepid Radio with Scotty Roberts and Dr. John Ward.
I want to go where the lame will walk. I want to see...
You know, if I was so bold, John and I were going to actually record a Christmas carol for you, but we chickened out. But I will let you know some of the words. It was to the tune, think of the tune Jingle Bells in your head. And we want to invite you in back to our show with Dr. Charles Aling by just giving you a few words. Here's how the lyrics went. It said, think jingle bells. Jingle bells, ancient tells, the Ogdode laid an egg. Senenmut and Hatshepsut left Tut without a leg. Jingle bells, ancient tells, the Ogdode laid an egg. Amenhotep lost his bet, and Thebes was washed away. Now, if only we could do that to music. Careening through the sand on a one-horse chariot, chasing down your slaves with 50,000 men. The Red Sea looked so tight, and you sent them forth to smite, but the waters closed, and you were hosed, and the Hebrews left your sight. Oi! And back into Jingle Bells. So
that's a classic. Yeah.
Why, thank you. It's a classic to come, and we never did get the chance to record this before the show, so we're in regret. But Dr. Aling, folks, welcome back to the show. We were talking a little bit about the break about your time spent in Egypt and how things have changed now. And you were there in Egypt excavating. When were you there again?
The middle and late 1970s. We did the Tomb of I and the nearby Tomb 25, which is just a small, undecorated tomb. We did those, and then about, I suppose 5-6 years later, toward the end of the 70s, we were back doing, inscription copying at the Karnak Temple.
Oh, that's awesome.
And you were saying, Dr. Aling, where was your dig house when you were here?
Well, our field headquarters was the house of Howard Carter.
That's astounding.
It's now been renovated and it's a cafe, but it's actually got a wonderful holographic image of Howard Carter. So when you walk into his office, he actually comes into the office and sits prominently on the corner of his desk, and he gives out this spiel. And the holographic image it's so lifelike. It's fantastic. You wouldn't recognize the place now. You wouldn't recognize.
No, I'm sure not. And we stayed in the old Luxor Hotel over on the east side of the river, and because it was recommended in the 1929 Baedeker's Guidebook.
Wow, 1929 guidebook? That was old when you were there.
That was. And,
well,
but I particularly liked it because, of course, the Luxor Temple is right across the street from the place.
Right.
So we could go across and look at the Luxor Temple anytime we wanted to.
I believe the Luxor Hotel was actually the first hotel built in Luxor, if my memory serves me right. I think it's one of the first. And it's still there today. I mean, they're actually in the middle of renovating. They started the renovation just before the revolution started. And it's kind of waned off over the past couple of years. But they are still continuing slowly. But when you were here during the 70s, just to give our listeners some insight, what was between the Nile and the Colossi of Memnon when you were here?
Nothing. Farm fields.
And Scotty, what is now between the Nile and the Colossi of Memnon when you were here?
When I was there, several petrol stations, a main road, which you could call a minor highway. We would drive from your house. If we walked from the banks of the Nile, where we would get off the ferry boat from the East Bank, and walk to your house, it took us about 10 minutes on a good clip, 15 minutes to walk down through the village to your house, passing all the shops, and everybody saying, "Hello, Dr. John," they would wave at you, they would say. And everybody trying to say hello along the way. And then way back into the sugar cane and the banana fields back in there and where your house is. And then we'd hop a car and continue to go west from your house, and we'd be at the Colossi of Memnon in about 10 minutes.
Yeah. But it's fascinating when we regale these stories, because, you know, if you just go back just to the 70s, which isn't that long ago, there was nothing here. And now it's a thriving, it's a city in its own right, even though we don't have a thriving metropolis here on the West Bank. It's all a mixture of little intertwining villages. But as Dr. Aling quite rightly says, when he was here during the late 70s, there was nothing here. It was nothing between the Nile and the Colossi. Wonderful, wonderful memories. What was it like actually excavating in the Tomb of I during the 70s, Dr. Aling?
Well, it was, of course, extremely hot, but not so bad once you get down into the tomb. The temperature outside might be 120, but when you get down into the tomb itself, it was pretty comfortable down underground. But what we had right outside of the entrance to the tomb, over on the as you're looking west, over on the right-hand side, there was a little bit of shade, so we had a rest area for the staff over there. Then we rebuilt the steps with concrete going down into the tomb where the steps used to be, and we left half of them natural, the way they've been since ancient times, and then built the other half with new concrete so that people wouldn't kill themselves carrying stuff up out of there.
Well, where you used to have your shade to the right-hand side west, that is actually now a purpose-built shaded area, complete with benches, a nice little wooden portico, and some display signs.
Interesting. Well, when we were there, of course, if you're familiar with the paintings in the one decorated room there in that tomb, there are a couple of thick red stripes that run along the bottom of the paintings. And that was a full meter off the bedrock when we cleared out all the debris. But the debris was right up to those red lines.
Wow.
And the sarcophagus had been taken out, of course, years ago and taken to the Cairo Museum, but the lid had never been found. And so we were very interested to see if the lid was there, to see if we could find any evidence that the king was actually buried in the tomb. And we did. We found some bones and some other things that proved that. But the lid we discovered totally intact on the floor. They had just tipped it off when they were desecrating the tomb. I would assume, I practically know.
In antiquity, probably.
Yeah, King Horemheb is the one who probably desecrated that tomb. Well, anyway, the lid, the inscription on it was perfectly intact, and that thing would have been probably worth $250,000 as a royal sarcophagus lid, but of course we left it there for the Egyptians, and the army had to move it out, I guess. They've got it up reunited with its box in the Cairo Museum now. So
now, is that the picture? I've got a picture for our show, the little banner ad we did with your face on it, and in the background, kind of hazy, we show you, Dr. Aling, in your pith helmet back in the 70s. And you're leaning on a big stone. Is that the sarcophagus lid in that picture?
No. What that is one of the blocks at Karnak, I do believe.
Oh, all right. So if you want to see Dr. Aling about 40 years ago, or more, in his pith helmet, back in his excavation days, you just go to the Facebook and the social networks and look up our ads over on the Intrepid Radio site over there, and just go to www.intrepidradio.com and scroll down. You'll find that image of Dr. Aling. So Dr. Aling, you have, I cannot. There's that danger of building you up so much because of my personal respect for you and the love I've had for you over the years, and I know that you tried for many years to get me to come back and finish my degree, and. And John and folks is literally many years. It's good 10 years. Dr. Aling would say, Scotty, you got to come back. You can come back and finish your degree, and I never did, and I wish I had. But there are things that you taught me that have stuck with me over the years. There are things you've said to me. I've quoted you in 3 different books now, and I talk about you in the acknowledgments of every one of my books for being the man who instilled a love for all of this in me. Let me ask you about your what fascinates me about you is the things that you have I don't even know how I'm trying to tie the knot in this little segue here I'm trying to create, but you know of new discoveries in that have a bearing on biblical history. You have been somebody who has, through all these years, you have stood very stalwart as a biblical history being efficacious. And I have, even though I've had some of my moments of lapse of faith in some of the faith behind what I've said I believed in the past, I always maintain that the Bible has efficacious history. Whether you can adhere to the faith elements to every point or not, you cannot cast out the Bible as an efficacious historical document. Could you speak to that based on what you know, based on some of the new discoveries you know, and things like that?
Yes. Well, as you probably know, I'm also president of something called the Institute for Biblical Archaeology,
yes.
Which is a very small organization which publishes Artifacts newsletter. But the main thing I do as that, and Clyde Billington, my colleague, he's the executive director of the Institute. We speak in churches virtually constantly. Right now, of course, Christmas Sundays we don't do much, but the rest of the year, basically, I don't even expect to get to a service at my own church where I'm a member. I'm just out speaking constantly on these topics, and I have come to the conclusion a long time ago that yes, the faith elements, the key elements in the Christian faith, must be accepted by faith. You're not going to find any archaeological evidence, for example, of the virgin birth of Jesus Christ. It's not going to happen because that type of thing doesn't leave a physical archaeological trace. But when you come to many of the historical things, and there's a lot more we'd like to know, of course, but over the years, so many discoveries have been made that support the scriptures from a historical standpoint, so I've come to the conclusion that physical apologetics is perhaps, to some degree anyway, wasted on the non-believer. I found that in these churches where I speak, the discoveries that have been made, things that I have made as discoveries from printed sources, and from these discoveries in museum basements and so on, the kind of things that I can bring to these people is a tremendous faith strengthener. And I think probably you'd want to start at some other level, perhaps, if you were dealing with people who had no biblical knowledge, no biblical faith whatsoever. But the exciting thing is to look at all of these discoveries that support, particularly some of the chronological aspects of biblical history, and I'm most familiar with Egypt on this score rather than some of the other areas. But for example, let me give you a couple of illustrations of this.
All right.
I'll give you a New Testament illustration first. There is an inscription that has been discovered at Nazareth, which is a very interesting inscription because it was set up probably by Claudius. Now, if you know your Roman history, Claudius is like 41 to 54
right.
AD. And Claudius set up this inscription in Greek in Nazareth, and he's saying that there have been so many bodies that have disappeared out of tombs that there's going to be the death penalty for disturbing burials and removing bodies from tombs.
Oh, my.
And I find that to be very interesting in the light of not only the account of the bodily resurrection of Christ, but also in the light of the verse that says that at the time Jesus rose from the grave, many people rose from the grave. And it's an obscure verse that people don't take up and look at very often. I think.
Right. I was just talking to somebody about that the other day.
Yeah. Also, if you look at some of the another example, you look at some of the printed histories or published histories written by Romans. They'll tell you about Pontius Pilate, and one of the things they do is they give him the title Procurator of Judea. Now, any good Roman historian knows that that's wrong for that period of time. Tacitus, the leading historian who lives, much later than Pilate, calls him the procurator. And so people pick up on that, and that's how we know him. But an inscription was found in Caesarea, which was set up by Pilate himself, and it says, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea. So we see that indeed he himself tells us that he had the appropriate title.
Wasn't that one of the, and I've used that example before, as one of the first really hard archaeological bits of evidence that he existed, was in 1964 in Caesarea Philippi.
Now, another example, and I don't know if you're familiar with Doug Petrovich at all. Doug is he was a missionary for years in Siberia, of all places. But he came back, and he is a graduate student now writing his dissertation at the University of Toronto in archaeology. And Petrovich has just published an article. It's in a rather obscure journal, but it's on Egyptian and Near Eastern interconnections and so on. I think it's published out of Arizona someplace. But Petrovich has pointed out that in the reign of Amenhotep II, who he and I take to be the pharaoh of the Exodus, and that's a whole program in itself to talk about.
Me too.
Yep, that's right. Yep, good. But anyway, what Petrovich has found is that during the reign of that particular pharaoh in the 1400s BC, the capital city in the north, which was a site now called Tel El Daba, which is one of the biggest archaeological sites in Egypt. It's being worked on by the Austrians and the Germans. That site, during the reign of that king, was totally abandoned. Capital, just completely abandoned. Secondly, the big naval base was there, the main Egyptian naval base. It was shut down for a generation. So that was very interesting in the light of the Exodus. But also, he's got a text that he cites. Now, I've not been able to see the hieroglyphs of this yet. And, I want to see it. It's at Karnak someplace, I think. It's either an object removed from Karnak or it's somewhere in Karnak Temple. But there's a text there which is unique in Egyptian history. And King Amenhotep II is giving orders, and the beginning of it and the back part of it are chipped away, so we only see the heart of this inscription. But he's giving an order to destroy all the idols or images, whatever you wish to call them, of the gods of Egypt, particularly Amun-Re, king of the gods, which is extremely interesting.
John places the Exodus under Amenhotep III. So
the third, yeah.
Oh, yes, I'm so wrong.
Yes.
Well, the third is that's not a heretical position. It's you don't want to claim Ramses II as the pharaoh of the Exodus with the biblical data that we have. But
well, he was in all the movies, so that's good enough for some people. And I've got to tell you, I don't know how aware of this you are, but Ridley Scott is making a remake of the Ten Commandments. I think it's a new movie coming out next year called Exodus, and Ridley Scott is doing this. And he's got Christian Bale playing Moses and a British actor playing Ramses. And I thought, really, nowadays, and Dr. Aling, is there anybody really nowadays that sincerely believes Ramses II was the pharaoh of the Exodus?
Well, unfortunately, there are. Kenneth Kitchen, of course, holds to that position, famous former University of Liverpool Egyptologist. He's retired now, but he holds that view. And also Jim Hoffmeyer, who was he was at Wheaton for years. Now he's over at Trinity Seminary in Deerfield, Illinois. But Hoffmeyer follows along with Kitchen and still believing that Ramses II is the pharaoh. But to me, the information that's out there now makes that a pretty outmoded idea. I mean,
that's what I thought.
Everything in this period fits better with an 18th dynasty Exodus. Some people take Thutmose IV, some people take Amenhotep II, and John takes evidently Amenhotep III. But 18th dynasty is, to me, where it is. I mean, it's got to be in that period.
See, Scotty.
And I agree. See, Scotty.
Yep.
See, John. John says of mine, we were signing our books at the Paradigm Symposium earlier in the fall. And a friend of ours bought a book, and I said something fun about John and his theory on Amenhotep III as we were signing it. And John writes, he says, Scotty's theory of Senenmut and Amenhotep II, he says, are amazing. And he says, just turn to page 287 and you'll find it in its entirety. And you turned it to page 287. Of course, there's only 286 pages in the book. So, it's John's dig at my theory. So,
Dr. Aling, you don't know how many evenings or mornings or conversations I've had to listen to Scotty while we were writing The Exodus Reality. And he would say, well, Dr. Charles Aling would have said this, Dr. Charles Aling said that, and Dr. Charles Aling, well, he has effectively placed you on such a high, what's the word I'm looking for? Possibly the top of a Corinthian column. I don't know. You're up there. You know, imagine you're way up there above us all, looking down, and you're the benchmark for Scotty.
Well, I appreciate that. We'll have to get you over here to Minnesota sometime so we can get together and discuss some of these things in more detail. That would be fun.
I would
absolutely.
I'd love to get you back over here. That would be something.
I actually thought you were going to say, Dr. Aling, I thought you were going to say, we're going to have to get you to come in and complete your master's degree.
That's a good idea. Well, see, the thing is, if you're dealing with officials, and I did my doctoral dissertation on officials during the period that we're talking about, Amenhotep II, Tutmosis IV, Amenhotep III, and one of the things about dealing with officials is that, to my knowledge, there is, for an official like Senenmut, for example, there's no English list of all of his titles. The titles that he had are published by German scholars, particularly a guy named Helk, and they're all in hieroglyphs. You'd find every title that Senenmut had, every single monument that he has left, but they're all in hieroglyphs. Nobody, because the only people in general who are interested in this stuff read hieroglyphs. So, and there's no advantage to, financially to translate a book like that would have this stuff, because the number of people buying it would be so tiny that there's just no point in it. But
from my research, I found there were 92 different royal titles bestowed on him.
Yeah, there are tons of them. There are tons of them, pages of them for all these officials, and then all the commentaries on these people, the biographies such as they are, and they're very scanty. But the modern biographies are almost all in German. You don't find anything much in English, a little bit, but not a whole lot. So one of the things that you really need to get that degree for would be to languages, so you could work with them, for all of this, because it's very important. Careers without knowing the Egyptian.
I'll have to order my Rosetta Stone software.
Yep.
John sent me, as we were doing our research for the book, he sent me several things that were in French. There was a map that we used from a book, l'Egypte, something blah, 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 under Napoleon, and all of Napoleon's archaeological work and all of his guys. And we used a map that they drew of Luxor of the time in Lake Malkata.
There was a Prussian by the name of Lepsius, who in the middle 1800s, explored this whole area and did extremely accurate and detailed drawings of every inscription, every temple wall, and these are published in what they call elephant folio volumes, these huge things. And I found out some years ago that of all places, the Minneapolis Public Library in their rare book room has a complete set of these things.
Oh, you're kidding.
No.
Now, I went to the Minneapolis Public Library when I was writing that little paper in seminary in your class on, it was supposed to be on the educational system Moses would have encountered in the 18th dynasty Egypt. And you told me some books to go look up there, and I went there. So, I need to go over there and look at that. That's a half hour away from here.
Yeah, that would be a good thing for you to look at.
Wonderful.
You might learn something, Scotty.
Well, John, I'll bring you along when you come out. And we'll learn something together. Dr. Aling, I'll have him coming out believing Amenhotep II sooner or later. We are at the bottom of the hour, which means we've got to go out to break. Folks, you hang on. We'll be right back. Dr. Charles Aling is our guest. And you stick out through the break and get your pencils ready. There's some great stuff coming up.